Today on Sports Central, we go over our next team prediction of this offseason, and it's going to be over the Texas Tech Red Raiders, a team that was 4-6 overall in the 2020 season. And this is a Texas Tech team with a very interesting season coming up here in 2021. Obviously, we've got Tyler Shough coming in from Oregon, which is the main storyline for this Texas Tech team going into 2021, is having a new quarterback under center, as it looks like Tyler Shough will be the primary starting quarterback for this team next season. So how will this team be in 2021 is what we'll be going over here today. We're going to go and get started with Texas Tech's final prediction. We'll be looking at your season trends from 2020 to get things started here today. And once again, this team was 4-6 overall in 2020. So this team obviously was not a bad team. I mean, 4-6 is not a terrible record, and considering how crazy of a 2020 season it was, this team did play pretty well. Beat West Virginia 34-27. Also had a big one over Baylor, 24-23. That was a very close game. Beat Kansas as well, 16-13. Lost to Oklahoma State by 6. So obviously that was a pretty tough loss there. Very close. And that was kind of the theme for this team throughout the season, was they had a ton of close matchups that were definitely winnable, but in the end they just were on the wrong end of a few of these games. And Texas is a huge example of that. That game went into overtime on September 26th. They lost that game 63-56. It was a shootout. Texas got the win in the end, but it was a very close one. They also had a close game against Kansas State. That was a loss. Close game against TCU, also a loss. I mean, really the only bad game last season for this Texas Tech team was against Oklahoma, where he lost 62-28. So once again, this team was overall not bad last season, 2-3 in their first 5, and then 2-3 in their last 5. So overall, this team was pretty consistent over the course of 2020. But looking at your returning production going into next season, this is really where things start to get interesting. Alan Bowman, of course, transferring to Michigan, which is a huge move. Obviously, Alan Bowman was the primary starting quarterback for this team last season. You also had Henry Colombi, who split time with Alan Bowman. Alan Bowman had 1,600 yards, 10 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and a 65% completion rate last season. Henry Colombi also had very similar stats, just over 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and a 66% completion rate. So obviously having Tyler Shough come in, that's going to be a huge, once again, storyline for this team, and it was a huge move for both Oregon and Texas Tech. I mean, Texas Tech is kind of a random location for an Oregon quarterback to move, so it was very interesting when it happened at first, but I definitely think this Texas Tech team could definitely benefit from this change. Tyler Shough, I do have a lot more faith in him than Alan Bowman right now. And I think even if Alan Bowman did stay, Tyler Shough would more than likely win the starting position. If you look at Tyler Shough in Oregon last year, of course, it was his first starting season for Oregon. So there are a couple of inexperiences there. And obviously with him being as young as he was, he did mess up a few times last season, turned over the ball quite a bit. But if he can improve that going into next season, if he can control his accuracy as well a little bit better, that will be huge for this Texas Tech team, and I think this team could definitely benefit significantly with Tyler Shough going into next season if he does improve, which I do expect him to. I think Tyler Shough is definitely a quarterback with some of the most potential in the Big 12. I think he'll definitely be in contention to be a top half quarterback in the Big 12, but obviously the conference next season is actually very stacked at the quarterback position, so that's definitely something to note as well. In the running back core, of course, you got SaRodorick Thompson coming back. Last season, he put up just over 700 yards. He was a big asset to this team. Xavier White is also coming back. He was their second running back in the backfield last season. Also put up 500 yards and 2 touchdowns. So the running back core was very talented last season for Texas Tech. This team had 3 running backs. Taj Brooks is also another name. He put up 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. So overall, this running back core was stacked last season, and they will be going to next season as well, returning obviously your top 2 running backs there. As for your receiving core, Eric Ezukanma, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, but of course last season he put up 740 yards, 8 and 6 touchdowns. So he played very well for this team. He was a huge asset in the receiving category, and I think for Tyler Shough, he's going to be a huge weapon. Miles Price, TJ Vasher were the second and third wideouts for this team last season. Miles Price is returning. TJ Vasher is not. So Miles Price, of course, last season, also very talented. Put 400 yards for this team, and then TJ Vasher, of course, put up 220 yards. So This team returning your top 2 wideouts, I am really not concerned about the receiving core. There's a ton of depth there, and I think in general this Texas Tech team offensively looks very good. If you look at Tyler Shough, he's going to have the most influence on how this team is next season. If the quarterback position is not very good, Texas Tech probably will struggle. However, if this team and Tyler Shough plays well, I mean, I can see this team definitely thriving a ton in the Big 12 next season. But looking at the offensive line, you lose one on there. You also lose 1 defensive lineman, 2 in the secondary. So defensively, I mean, it looks great defensively as well. You're only losing 3. So the experience is going to be very good on this Red Raider team going into next season. And personally, I think this team definitely has got some of the most potential in the Big 12. Potentially a dark horse is what I'm thinking here with this Texas Tech team. I don't think this team will win the Big 12 by any means. I mean, the Big 12 is going to be as good of a conference as it's been in the past decade. I mean, it's going to be a tough year in the Big 12 to be a big standout team because Oklahoma and Iowa State both are going to be outstanding next year, especially the Oklahoma Sooners. That team is going to be very good next season. I could see them potentially in the national championship game next season. So the Big 12 is going to be a very tough conference next season. I could see the Big 12 being the third or possibly even the second best conference in all of college football next season, which is insane. But this is a very talented conference next season. I mean, you got 5 or 6 teams that are definitely going to be ranked for a good chunk of next season, I could say. I mean, you got Texas, Oklahoma State, you got TCU potentially, you got West Virginia. Lots of teams that are definitely going to be at the top of the ranks in the Big 12 next season. So is this Texas Tech team going to be a top half team is the main question, and will this team be able to make it to a bowl game is another big question. And I think if Tyler Shough, once again, if he plays very well, if he improves a ton this offseason, this Texas Tech team should be headed to at least a bowl game next season. But looking at your schedule now, Houston is going to be your first game. You got them in a neutral location. Then you got SF Austin the week after that. You got Florida International as your third non-conference game. Then you're on to conference play. You got Texas on the road and then West Virginia as well to get things started in the conference lineup. Of course, your non-conference games are actually very simple next season. Houston is a pretty bad team. Like, they were not very good at all last year. And then SF Austin, Florida International, both are not very good teams. FIU especially is not a very good team. So this team next season, I mean, if you look at the non-conference games, you got 3 pretty easy wins there. I mean, if you lose one of those non-conference games, I'm very concerned about your ability to get to a bowl game next season. But once again, the conference is a very tough conference next season in the Big 12. I mean, all 9 of your games are going to be tough in some way. You got Texas, Oklahoma State, and West Virginia, and then TCU. Those are your first 3 conference games. Then you got Kansas on the road. Should be your easiest game there. Kansas is going to be a terrible team next season. I mean, they're just horrendous right now with the coaching issues and everything. And but anyway, Kansas State, then you got them at home. You got Oklahoma then, that brutal matchup on the road on the 30th. You got Iowa State coming to town on the 13th of November. Then Oklahoma State to follow that, also coming to Texas Tech. Then you got Baylor on the road to finish out the season. So looking at September here, you got 3 easy wins there once again. Houston, SF Austin, and FIU. I expect all those teams to not be very good next season. And even if SF Austin is a good team in their division, I mean, they're still an FCS team. So, but yeah, Texas Tech, of course, will be 3-1, I do think, at the end of September. Texas on the road. I mean, that could be a close matchup there, but I'm going to give it to Texas just because it's on the road. And also, that's going to be a talented team next season with Texas. So you're going to be 3-1 through your month of September, which is not a bad situation. But once again, the conference schedule is tough next season. You got West Virginia then. West Virginia is also a team to watch out for. Do not sleep on them. I'm going to give the Mountaineers the win there, even though it's going to be very close. TCU, Kansas, both are going to be wins. TCU is going to be a big win. TCU, I do think next season, I mean, they were not very good in 2020, but I do think that team does have a pretty good season in 2021. It's going to be a close one, but Texas Tech does get the win. Kansas on the road, once again, not expecting much out of Kansas. They'll be an easy win. So you're going to be 5-2 heading into the last couple of weeks of October. Kansas State and Oklahoma both are going to be losses. I think Kansas State is a very winnable matchup, and that was, once again, very tough to predict there, but I'm going to give it to Kansas State in that matchup to get the win. Oklahoma, that's going to possibly be a blowout. I mean, that Oklahoma team next season is looking very good. Once again, I would not be surprised to see them in the national championship game. So you're going to be 5-4 heading into November. So overall, this team does look pretty good going into November with a 5-4 record. That is not a bad situation at all, and I do think you do get up to 6 wins. You're going to beat Baylor. However, you will lose to Iowa State and Oklahoma State. With having both those games at home, potentially we could see a win. an upset win in one or two of those games, but I'm going to give both of the games to Iowa State and Oklahoma State there, and you're going to finish out the season 6-6. So that is not a bad situation. If you can get up to 6 wins, obviously that puts you into a bowl game, which is going to be a huge accomplishment for this team. I think if you can get to a bowl game next season, that's definitely a step in the right direction for Texas Tech. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this team. Definitely a very intriguing team going into next season in the Big 12. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this team does. Obviously, with a team with Tyler Shough now from Oregon, I mean, it's kind of hard to predict how this team will be next season, but I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks again for watching. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. I'll see you guys later.